GROGTALK, Dan.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Well, you're here every week. Well, pretty much every week. So, for those who will notice, we have a little figure right here. It's got like the weatherman. Well, not you. You're a little figure too.
I am a little figure.
We have another little figure over here. We have David Thompson. David, good morning, or for you, good evening.
Good evening. Good evening.
So
yeah, it's just almost 10 p.m. on Saturday.
So yes, Saturday 10. Yeah, it's nothing like spending your Saturday evening with us.
Yes. You're already insulting our guest.
That's right. Oh, is that an insult?
Yes.
I thought it was an honor. All right. So today we have a special. We're starting. I think I'm going to call this a DM discussion series because in a couple of weeks we have Vic Dorso, right? So
yes.
We've got a series of DMs, international, and so today we're talking to David about he's written ebook, and we also want to talk about different styles of play when it comes to first edition. He's listened to our podcast. Again, we haven't paid him. He's completely here on his own volition. So, David, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us how you got into the hobby?
Sure. Well, pretty much probably like everyone else, it was the friend of the brother of a friend who they were the original base, which somehow turned into the AD&D. And I think after about the third or fourth adventure that I played, I was thrust into my hands and told, "Oh, now you can do it." And so the next decade, I was the DM. And just because of the sort of timing it's one of those feelings of when you're young and all of a sudden you were in command of 5 or 6 people, and some older, and they'd be turning, "Well, what's next? What are you doing?" You were in control. So it was like a bit of a power buzz, I suppose, as well, because they're the sort of skills that you learn as a DM, is being in control of the whole universe. It went from there. So I was very much the DM for that group and for a few other groups that I got involved with, of people that are like-minded in the way that you want to play, especially with something like AD&D, which can be quite... Oh, sorry.
I think he got killed. I think it's
how you interpret it.
Yeah, hold on, David. Yeah,
down under.
Yeah, yes, he kind of broke up a little bit there.
David, can I ask you, what year was it? Do you remember roughly the year you first started playing Basic?
Yeah, well, that would have been about 79. I was young, and like I said, it was one of those things where I just took to it. As soon as I had the DM's guide in mind, it was just amazing. The type of the way that it's written, the Gygaxian prose is just fantastic, and it really stuck. I mean, perspicacious, when you're trying to work out, well, you've got a dictionary next to you as well as the rule books so that you can figure out what it is he's exactly talking about. It's just fantastic.
We're still trying to figure it out, as you know.
Yeah.
40 years later. What?
Yeah.
So were you in Australia at the time?
Yes. Well, I'm from one of the capital cities is Adelaide. We've got 7 from South Australia originally, Adelaide. So you've got like 1.5 million people in South Australia as a state, but 1.1 million of those people live in Adelaide. So that's why my accents are different to like a normal Australian accent. It's just sort of, we're a bit more removed from, it's a bit more isolated. But yeah, it's all in Adelaide, which also sort of meant that everybody had to get to places. And so we had that, what's called the tyranny of distance, where someone 5Ks away, 10Ks away, 8Ks away, or, even around the corner or in the same suburb, but you'd congregate on the one house and stay there for a weekend. And you'd do that 2 or 3 weekends in a month, and then it would just...
Now, what I think is interesting is that you started playing so early in the development of D&D when you were in Australia. So it sounds like Dungeons and Dragons was obviously at that point in time making its way across the world, right? Because I would have thought, and
it's just amazing. What we didn't get was things like Dragon magazine. You had to find whatever, you had to find the specific stores that had these arrangement supplies and everything else, and they weren't easy to find. Really, where you'd end up meeting other people that were like-minded, because you just feel like, okay, well, The only people who would go to this one store were people looking for D&D stuff. So the old Path of Miniatures or
And that's why, of course, back in the day, you made sure to put your name in your book because it was such a big deal. If you lost your book, it wasn't, it isn't like now where we're able to go buy another one easily. If you bought a book and you lost it, you probably weren't going to be able to afford to get another one. David,
yeah.
Can I also ask you too? Had you played war games? So a lot of us had played war games before we came to Dungeons and Dragons. Did you have any background in wargaming?
There were two games played that were basic battle type. You'd have your fold-up maps, and you'd have your little cardboard chits that you had the cardboard cut out, and you'd play on it'd be an Avalon Hill product, or it'd be like something old, one of the old style games that were, you'd roll a few dice, and then that's where one of the games I had, which I can't remember the name of, on the back of it. So the rule book, which was, a single A4 sheet of paper, A5 booklet type sort of thing, it had, if you have any questions, add a self-addressed stamped envelope, no more than 5 questions, and then
we had to figure it out. Yeah, I am the typical ignorant American. I had to look up Adelaide, where it was on the map of Australia, and I'm like, oh wow, that is, you said it's out there. It's on the south end, so that's interesting.
Now, so for many of us, we took a long time off. Did you continue playing? Have you been playing since the late 70s, or did you take a hiatus like many of us did?
I took a hiatus when I pretty much from about 93 to 94 would have been the last time that I played. I was traveling overseas. I went back to, just traveled around a little bit and had a few games in the UK with some people that I met up. And but then when coming back to Australia again, abandoned it, but it was just, life gets in the way and you get married and you get kids. And then I met up with a few other people who were suddenly discovering it. And this is roughly a handful of years ago when 5th edition started. These guys had never seen D&D before. And I was like, oh, yeah, I've been playing. Yeah, well, there's a reason it's called 5th.
Where have you been? Do you have a 5th edition group now?
I know. I helped my kids with some of their initial groups just because they were, I suppose, DM'd a few sessions in that regard, and sort of been providing advice to some people.
Hey, David, because I missed some of that, so are you currently playing 1st edition? Do you have a group?
No, I don't have any groups running at the moment. But I've sort of I have recently been helping some people with their adventure and how to be a DM, I suppose, because I think the new books sort of have everything so prescribed in the way that characters are and the monsters are and everything else, that level of creativity, when they have to move off script, it's a little bit harder for them.
Yeah, and I think that's, my understanding is that's a big difference, I guess, between old school and new school, right? I know Matt Finch has talked about this in his primer for old school gaming, how old school gaming, it was much more, you just kind of roll with it, so to speak. Everything's not set out, you don't have a rule for everything, you just sort of wing it. And I like that style quite a bit. Maybe we could shift to your eBooks, because those are pretty impressive. They're not pretty impressive, very impressive.
Yeah.
It's something that it's very impressive. It's something that I started, as James knows, and James, you've contributed to it as well, which is sort of trying to restate, so to speak, the rules in a fashion that's maybe a little bit easier to understand and collected in a little bit more organized fashion. I mean, the DMG is an amazing book. I agree with you completely. But at times it can be a bit unwieldy, and the rules are spread out all over the place. And so maybe you could talk a little bit about what your ebooks are and why you decided to write them.
It was to help people to understand something that I enjoyed that was very difficult for people to if you said to somebody, here's the book, they're sort of assuming that the rules are in there, and they're sort of assuming that, oh, wow, it's going to teach me how to play, which is not the case. So I had some people that I was working with, some younger folk, like they were in their 20s. They were wanting to play first edition D&D, and so I wrote up the initial cheat sheet as about 2 or 3 pages. And that's when I realised how much I sort of had sitting around in my head, just rattling around. When my son wanted to play a first edition game with his friend, same thing there. And it was putting it all together and getting it all happening. And it just sort of went from there. And it was like, well, okay, well, I've got a lot to write on all of this. And I wrote it just for therapy. And I thought, well, I should put it up on one of those many blog website type things. And there's a local group called Tableau, which is just a free Melbourne-based site that does these, you've seen it. It's just like WordPress. And I just published on that. So put it all up there. And then as I was doing it, I was like, well, okay, started doing each of the classes. I think I've got the Paladin, the Druid, and the Fighter to sort of knock up.
Can you talk about your view on Unearthed Arcana?
Yeah.
I really didn't like it. Sorry.
Thank you. Don't apologize. You should be rewarded.
That's right.
Oh, well, it's more of a case that it's the way how I always read it. You didn't have to have a barbarian class.
Correct.
You could play a ranger as a barbarian, or a fighter as a barbarian, or even really a paladin as a barbarian, depending on the type of religious structure how you want to hold the paladinic powers is. And that's what I loved about the first edition AD&D was just, if you wanted to say, right, I'm a pirate, well, you're a pirate. If you wanted to say that you're a swashbuckling Robin Hood, you can do that, because it came down to how you wanted to play your character, rather than, right, here's my class that says that I'm a gladiator, a class that says I'm an Amazon. This is how I always felt it anyway. And that's sort of how I always ran it.
Well, James liked it because he always wanted to be a Snerveblin or whatever.
I didn't want to be a Snerveblin. That's a more horrible Snerveblin.
Can you talk about your opinion on illusionists?
Oh, I know his opinion.
And in particular, gnome illusionists.
Well, see, if you don't, I want to show that I read, at least peruse his. I even wrote in one of my notes. I don't know why you continued after your statement in Illusionist. You said, for many, the Illusionist is a throwaway character. You should have just ended it there. But then you try to redeem the character class. So I'll allow...
And you think you should have excised for many.
Right. Just, yeah.
The Illusionist is a throwaway character?
Yeah, period.
Maybe James can be your editor.
Yeah, I could edit that for you.
There's a typo.
That's right. That would be you'd be done with Illusionist. You wouldn't have to continue much on, but...
what character are you playing now, James, in that game? So just out of curiosity, what are you playing? A paladin, a human paladin, half-elf ranger?
Part of the game for me is accepting the characters, and which was the most challenging to survive, and so I picked a fighter gnome illusionist.
Gotcha. All right.
Yeah, that's pretty much it, yeah. I mean, you're looking at, 7-11 as the maximum if you're lucky, something like that.
No, I think...
or is it 6?
I think it's like 6 and 7 or 5.
That's really high. Why do people even think about level limits? If the level limits are a concern in your game, your levels are you're getting too high.
Well, and with John, you heard on the phone, who's the third DM for us. He's taken Dan's level of player character killing. We have a graveyard on our meetup site where we put all the deceased characters. John has almost doubled that amount on there just in his first small.
This is my plan.
Right.
You guys were all upset about all the high mortality rate in my game. I'm like, you know what I'll do? I'm going to hand it over to John.
Yeah.
You'll wish you had me.
Yeah. Is a 25% survival rate, is that good? Because that's what happened at a Village of Hamlet. The introductory module, everyone got slaughtered.
Not a 25% mortality rate.
There's a lot of death.
Yeah, so kind of going back, I don't have a problem with illusionists. I'm coming to terms with them.
Okay.
You just need a good DM to do that, and in fact, that's what David talks about. So, I like the word that you use, deconstruction of that, because it has this sense of you're trying to present AD&D as not as this dense tomes of complexity and, like you said, Gygaxian vocabulary, but I think still there's the challenge. You mentioned it about they kind of just dumps you in that you assume of some things. Do you think they assumed you played basic, either Moldvay or Holmes?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. They just assumed that, yeah, which probably was right, because the people who got the first lot of work were people who had the older box sets or played the older, they'd played those games, and it was all of Gary Gygax and his crew's people and people that they knew that they brought in. So absolutely, so. Absolutely. That's why it opens up with welcome to this thing, and here you go. By the way, the first 2 pages sort of assumes you don't know what you're doing, but then after page 3 or 4, we're going to assume that you know everything.
Yeah.
It's just
Yeah, because it's like Dan, I started in '83. I think I got the basic box, but it came after. And part of our thing was, well, why do I want to play basic? I'm going to play advanced. And so it really was learning the game. We had a couple of friends like you who were a couple years older, but we started with advanced and then stole things out of basic. But I think the assumption was you'd pick up the basic book, you'd learn the game, and then you'd go to the advanced one. So I know it's interesting. In your ebooks, you try to say, okay, well, here's the things you missed, especially in the Player's Handbook one, that if you didn't play basic. So I thought that was good. You could have just said, hey, just play basic, which was nice that you didn't do that.
That's where I'm heading.
What?
Holmes Basic. Well, Holmes Basic was just through level 3,
Yeah.
right? It was supposed to be play up to level 3, and then it was supposed to be for people to
the
transition.
gateway drug. It's the gateway drug.
Right. So I've decided AD&D has too many rules.
Right.
It's rules overload.
This podcast will be changing. Well, we're GROGTALK, not AD&D talk, so that's okay.
The Holmes, yeah. How many listeners do you think we'd have if we were like the Holmes Basic podcast? We think we have a small audience now. The Holmes Basic.
I think there's a lot of people who are very committed to Holmes Basic. I think
there are. There's strong groups, and you can see them when they sort of get out there. Because I've looked at a couple of other different types of podcasts, AD&D and so on. Because especially over the last couple of years, it's been interesting to see other people's take on the game, and the commentary back is very much, wow, I didn't realize that following the basic set and the basic rules and so on. So, and it's just that easy way of how I don't have to deal with the following.
Well, I think it's what you fall in love with. It's the first thing, like you said, you started with that.
Your first love.
Right.
You never forget your first love.
Exactly.
David, now I'd be interested to know why. I think you said, right, this younger generation was interested in playing a game of first edition. I'd be interested to know why. So, what was it about? Did you get the sense that they just wanted to play it the way Gygax did back in the day, or did they actually sense that they wanted to get a feel of what first edition was like and how it was perhaps different from 5th edition?
Yeah, no, entirely that. It was. I mean, the handful of people had played working at the time. A few people had played 1st edition D&D, and that, oh wow, and then they led to, from there went to, oh, I suppose we should just give it a shot, see what it's like. They got their hands on a rulebook one, and I don't understand a thing that's in here.
So, none of us do.
Right, we're still figuring it out. Yeah.
So this is how you do a fight. This is how you do it. This is how it sort of works, and this is how an interpretation on how this is. And they said, "Well, what do you mean by an interpretation on this?" I said, "Well, it's sort of up in the air." But yeah, so and I suppose it's one of the questions that you had in your email out was, is so lasting, and this is exactly it. It's like Star Wars. We had it as kids. The next generation had it. The next generation after had it, and our kids have got it. So it seems to be something that bridges few generations, and people will fall in love with an aspect of it where they can say, right, I like being a 2-weapon wielding ranger that just turns every orc into a blood mist. So
yeah, what I think is interesting, I don't know if any of you have been following Stephen Colbert's reintroduction to Dungeons and Dragons. Stephen Colbert hadn't played since he got out of college, and he started getting a little bit interested in it again, and he went and played in a solo charity game with Matt Mercer, who I wasn't familiar with, who I guess is a famous DM now. And Matt Mercer was explaining to Stephen Colbert his character. He's explaining how I think he's like half dragon or something. And you're Colbert, last edition Colbert knows his first edition. Right. So that would be like saying to me, explaining that your character is half a dragon. And I think Colbert was a bit startled. It really is sort of like, for a lot of us, it's like Han Solo coming out of Carbonite, and learning that Luke's a Jedi and all this. It's the things that you can be now in 5th edition is quite startling to a lot of us who haven't played in a long time. But David, I'd be interested to get your opinion on the survivability of 1st edition proper, so to speak. So, we know, of course, that there's a lot of retro clones out there, Osric and Dungeon Crawl Classics, things like that. Is it, if 1st edition had a feel which is different from other editions, and it's a feel that is attractive to some segments of players, even a new generation of players, should they play these retro clones, which are presumably, easier to understand, better organized? And I'm not trying to criticize Gygax here, because I think Gygax was amazing. I mean, to turn out these volumes and the amount of time it was amazing.
Right.
But is other than for either, because look, we're going to be gone, at some point.
We're back to this again.
Right? This is this is a segment. What's our segment?
Incomprehensible death.
We're transitioning to the incomprehensible death segment.
You're not going to be here. That's right. And now, that's right. I got to come up with a bumper for that.
So for a lot of us who are perhaps playing it for nostalgia, that's why you have a segment of players out there. They're still playing it. But for a new generation that wants a grittier feel that 1st edition had, should they just be playing some of these retro clones? Is that the future of the feel as opposed to 1st edition? Or do you think 1st edition is going to survive the generation that played it?
I think that the hardest part, the biggest challenge for 1st edition is that for a new generation coming through, they're looking at it going, well, why would I play 1st when I can play 5th or 6th? And you very much have to have a 1st ed person saying, no, try this, for that to happen. And that's in part why I also put as much of this up as I possibly could in my mind, is to get that up there, is just so that way if anybody was looking at it going, what is this? One day someone, in 50 years' time, someone's going to pick up a book from, go, what is this incomprehensible script and what is he talking about? And then they do a quick search on it. Oh, wow, there's a deconstruction of the whatever, or there's all these blogs on this and so on. And I think that it's only going to survive. Well, I mean, it doesn't really have to survive, because Wizards of the Coast certainly don't care if it survives or not. It's entirely down to us.
So, going through the books, so, just for our listeners, you start with the Player's Handbook, then the DMG, and then you had the classes, sans the Druid and Paladin. How did you figure out what content should go into which book? Because that really is, I think, a challenge as well. The newer games, or the newer versions, have basically said everything you need to play is in the Player's Handbook, and everything else is kind of supplemental.
And that's partly what we have to do as 1st edition AD&D is go through 2 or 3 books. I mean, when my son created one of his characters, or one of the characters for his friends, in his, they did N1, the
Cult of the Reptile.
Cult of the Reptile. Yeah. So they did that one, which they'd already played some 5th ed, and everybody was living it, and they all loved it, and that was fantastic. They all played this 1st ed version and had played N1, and I think only one character survived. So it's just
sounds great.
What was their reaction? So I'm always like to hear from people who have played both 5th edition, because I've never played 5th edition. Well, that's not true. I played it once. At a convention, it was the only slot. There was no 1st edition. Do I need to explain? Yeah, I really don't. No one cares. Experiment. It was back in college. I played 5th edition.
It was like in college with the
experimenting.
Yeah, there's a video.
You were young and impressionable.
I was. So, what was the reaction? Did they talk about the differences that as they perceive them between first edition and fifth edition?
Yeah, well, there was a lot more coaching for my son as the DM because he had to really understand more of how the rules worked, and because obviously there were the funky bits, and he wanted to play as much as first ed. He wanted to play as much as rules as people could handle, So I sort of call it rules as much as the players can take is what I call it, where you include whatever you think that they can handle, which for him and his crew, they included things like the weapon class adjustments for, weapon adjustments for armor class. It included, level limits and racial, the different types of races and the stats and so on. Spell casting, like he did as much as everybody could handle, which was cool. And they couldn't believe how it was more of a case of, do I make the jump? Yeah, you do. No, you don't. There was a lot more of that as opposed to, oh, there's a stat check. Let's do this. And you've got what you're running, what you're jumping, all the skills and all of the it was like, well, you get a character sheet with just some numbers on it. And it's like, well, okay, what can I do? Well, what do you want to do? So that's the thing that they found was the most different between the two classes, like of fifth ed to first ed. And so, but when he was playing that, he was making up his characters because he made up the characters he talked to them as to what classes that they wanted to be, and they sort of had an idea. So they, a couple of them wanted to be fighters or and he sort of explained how things happen. And he said to save time, he was going to make up some characters. So the first character he made up was an elven fighter magic user, I think, and had to go through the monster manual, the DM's guide, and the player's handbook to be able to sort something out. I was like, this is just crazy. He's like, what? I have to go. It's like, am I studying something? It's like I've got books all over this table. And it's like, well, yeah, that's how we did it.
That's it. It was ingenious. I'm sure it was accidental to make sure you bought all the books, even though you're not, as a player, you're not supposed to have all those books. So again, like you mentioned in your it's almost like the preface in the player's one, that it wasn't a standalone thing for a player to do. You were dependent on the dungeon master to do anything with that, because there was so much of the game that was hidden from you. So that was interesting. So do you think you were successful in your deconstruction? And if you, what would you have done different, or have you gotten any feedback from folks?
Yeah, there are a few questions that have come back, because people have sort of obviously gone, how does this, well, we did it this way, is that wrong? Or those there's no right or wrong answer for some of those types of questions. I think what I had more questions about, which was something that you mentioned, I think way back in like episodes 3 or 4 of your own podcast, was regarding the grappling, overbearing, and all of those rules. And especially how it went with the monk, because you have a monk, and so why is the monk different to normal everything else? And so I sort of had to I added a bit of extra onto the back of the monk, because all of these are living documents. As I'm rediscovering a rule, or as an idea of how this rule can be interpreted in a different way, or how this character class can be perceived in this way, I've gone back to revisit. So some of these documents I've touched up 3 or 4 times, to be able to put them up there. So that way it's not just here's a ranger and I'm just copying everything that's in the player's handbook on rangers. It's like, no, here's a ranger. You can play it like this. Imagine being a sailor where you can do it this way. You don't have to just be the ranger like Aragorn, which is obviously where ranger comes from. But, you can be a barbarian style ranger, or an Arctic ranger, a desert dweller, a Bedouin style, there's all different. But you've got to bring that to the actual table when you're creating the character. And I suppose as I'm trying to sort of highlight that and put that forward, I'm trying to not take over in terms of saying, well, I'm a DM and this is what I do. I think I've done that maybe a bit, but I've tried to make sure that it's been very much more, here's a way of interpreting this, and it doesn't have to be like this. As the DM or as a player, you can ask to make changes to make it look like this so it fits. And, rather than just thinking, right, hear noise, all I can do is listen to doors. It's like, well, that's a dumb thing. Perhaps the hear noise just means your senses are larger. Perhaps it means that you can hear into a cavern and hope that you get an idea. It's more than that. It's more than what you can sort of just read in a single line of a book. How else can you reinterpret it without bending the rules to the point that they break?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. And it's the struggle we all have because, the primer that Dan, always references for how to play old school is not to be so dependent on dice rolling and really just, well, if the player comes up with something that seems reasonable, use it. And, but then even in first edition, especially just as it moves into the book that will be not named, you get to the ability checks and you're really just basically creating skills, but not calling them that because now everything becomes a die roll. I want to jump over here. Okay, make a strength ability check. Versus, I think in the older way, it was just, yeah, you're a fighter. That seems pretty good. I'll give you a 10.
And you've got 15 strength, which means that you can do a deadlift weight of about 300 pounds. Yeah, you can jump over a 5-foot crevice without having to worry about it.
Right.
And that's the sort of, but you've got to have a DM that sort of thinks about it in that way. That's why I sort of keep using the phrase like-minded people. Because if you get like-minded people and they all like to use stat checks, well, that's fine. And if you get like-minded people and they all like to be a little bit more airy-fairy and creative, then that's just as good as well.
Well, the like-minded people I've seen, at least the ones that Dan and I play with, if we can do it automatically, we're totally fine with that. If we can't do it automatically, then I'd like a rule that's the most advantageous to my player.
I think there should also, if you're jumping the 5-foot crevice, and we know you definitely can make it, I think on a roll of a 1, you still fall and die in the crevice. Because that's fun, right?
For some. Yeah.
I mean, there should be a chance that... I think nothing's 100%. The best chance you have of doing anything, I think, should be 95%, which would be what? Would be right? A 1 is a failure.
Right, 1 would be a failure.
I use that at work. I always use that in work terms as well. When somebody says, "So how are we going with this?" as well, there's always a 5% chance of failure because I bring a lot of D&D into my life, which is sad, but it's just not like that.
But that's the tension, right? It's the Yoda thing. Do there's no try or do or don't do. Because I'm in a field where we have a lot of projects and everything's 90% done, but yet the thing's not done. It's like, oh, we're almost 90% done. 5 years later, we're 90% done. Either it's done or it's not done. And again, that's the tension when you have all these. There's certain rules or certain situations that are detailed, exhaustively in the DMG, and then there's other ones like, meh, you got to figure it out. And I think that's where the tension comes. Some people have to have, and they're the third edition people, and no slam on them, where they want every permutation, some rule for it. And then there's people who go back to the original, which we didn't have it, we just make it up, and as long as everyone's cool with it, we keep doing it that way. Where, if it's less than 5 feet, you automatically make it. If it's more than 5 feet, you, like you said, check your strength or something like that. I think both are valid plays, and I think that's what you do a good job with. You're not dictatorial in your statements. You say, this is what it is. You insert some things that are not by the book, but you again, in a very Gygaxian way, you preface it with, hey, there's no wrong way of playing. If people are having fun and they're enjoying it, I'm here to try to break this down for you, not to either embarrass you or say this is the only way to do it. So I thought that was well done.
Well, then that's what you've got to be aware of, especially in a game like D&D where you've even got. I know of a group where they don't even roll dice, and I think that's the whole point of doing it is to roll dice. But where they talk it all through and say, well, how much of it's D&D really? If you're just, but they do. They still call it D&D. They still got AD&D. They still have the classes and everything, but. They sort of come to an agreement about how their stats are and how many hit points, what they can do in terms of combat. And, and you can play like that if you've got everyone else involved in that. And that's not something that I would partake, but I get that that's how others would play.
Now, because you mentioned the book that will not be named, even though you named it. And it's what's interesting. I don't know if you. So how frequently do you update the books? Do you go back frequently, or how long did it take you to write all those, and do you keep updating them?
Yeah, well, pretty much yes. I mean, like for instance, I'm just looking at one. But I think the most recent update is something on the thief that I've done. I updated the thief element recently. It was just I cleaned up some text. I've made as I'm becoming more familiar with the software package, the Tableau tool, sort of making things look easier to read. But yeah, generally it's a matter of, well, yep, I'll read through it, and if I like the way how it sounds, then yep, that's okay. Or I think, oh, I could rewrite that phrase a bit better, and then bang. And like I said, if I treat them like living documents rather than hard and fast book, then you can just keep modifying them and adding to it or changing that up. And you think, well, actually, after reading a Dragon magazine, rereading a Dragon magazine, and then you look at, wow, they really did that piece on half-elves really well, and I like how they mentioned that, so I'm going to put that in there, and then bang, you just put that in, So it's just a case of updating as the thought is there. But how long did it take to put them in there? I think I started the first one about a year and a half ago.
Okay.
And I just uploaded it, but it took me about probably a couple of weeks, about 3 or 4 weeks to do the first one, and then it took a bit longer to do the DM's guide because I also wanted to get the language right. I didn't want to take over, because when you're doing the player's handbook, it's very much, this is how it works, and this is what they mean by this. This is how psionics are. Include it, don't include it. This is what happens. But when you're doing the DM's thing, and it's like, well, how to create a world, I'm not going to tell you how to create a world, but I want to give you the ability to know how to create a world, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So that's what I've tried to achieve so that took longer to do. And the different classes, some of it, like the illusionist was a burst of inspiration. I know you hate that, but it was a burst of inspiration to do the illusionist because everyone just laughs at the illusionist. It's like, man,
What?
is it really that bad?
What?
Everyone laughs at the illusionist.
You didn't laugh at that illusionist that did the total party kill on you guys on Treasure Barlon.
Yeah.
As a bad guy, they are the best bad guys.
That was
because
awesome.
realistically, illusionists, I mean, the only way to defend yourself against an illusion is by saying, I don't believe it's there, or I don't believe that. So you've got this class that knows that everything it looks at doesn't really exist. So eventually they're going to go nuts because they're always thinking, that doesn't exist. There's a Minotaur charging us. No, it doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. It's not a Minotaur. And then the Minotaur hits. But it's, it's like, that's the world that the illusionist lives in, where it's a matter of, that doesn't, if I don't like it, I'm going to just say it doesn't exist and hope that it's an illusion.
Well, and I think it's really good that you give some examples of, classic ones. Part of it was I was surprised a lot of the examples were in the DMG versus in the player's handbook. And again, not as a criticism, that was kind of, how do you take something that's so, you're trying to deconstruct it. You're trying not to just repeat what's in the player's handbook or the DMG, So what was the rationale to have some of the examples in the DMG part? You just assume anyone who's interested in first edition, they're going to read all the books anyway. Is that what's your rationale?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Okay.
That is it. And in the player's handbook, what I wanted to do with the player's handbook was say, right, those old goldenrod forms, how can someone fill out one of them? And what do they need to do to fill out one of those? And so when you look at one of those forms, you think, well, it's got armor class, base armor class at the back, dexterity bonus, and just grappling, overbearing, pummeling. What's that? There's nothing in the player's handbook about all of that, but there are these charts where so even to that point where you go, okay, this is what you can put in there so that if your DM's going to do it, it makes it easier for them. So that all you have to do is put +6, +8, +10. You don't have to know what it is. You just have to know how to fill it out. So that way, from a goldenrod point of view, you can create a character and fill out nearly all of it, and that's what you want to try and that's realistically what a player's handbook should have been trying to aim at. They knew what the character sheet was going to look like. They should have been able to help, but that's it's Gygax and it's first edition AD&D, and they either felt players will do what they want to do, or they felt they didn't have time, or they felt I don't know, whatever they felt. I wrote to TSR, and the 5 questions, as I said to you earlier, I went on a previous game where it said 5 questions, yes or no answers. So I put in 5 questions about some stuff, about some of the points that I was confused about, and I think I got about 2 pages of information back.
Do you still what year was that?
So that would have been 1980.
Do you still have that? A copy of that?
My mum threw it all out when I left the house. She threw out all my books. She threw out all my modules. She needed the room for a sewing room, so she just dismantled my room and threw everything. So I had to resource a handful of things.
Wait. Oh, okay. So what year was it thrown out?
93. I wasn't in the country at the time. Like, I think I'd been out of the country by about 2 weeks, and my room was turned into the sewing room.
But it's not just that it was turned into the sewing. Because look, I think that's fair.
Right.
The real issue is that it was just all the stuff was discarded.
Right.
Yeah.
It's rubbish, basically.
Yeah, that's rough.
Yeah,
she didn't even tell you.
She just had no value for it. So I was like, it's just all, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, and this is not about David and his mother's relationship, because we could go down that rabbit hole.
I like that. That's more interesting. Should we call her?
Yeah, my wife has kept, things where the son has written crayon, just scratch something. Like, why do we have, literally is a brush stroke. Yeah.
Well, yeah.
I mean, that's why I have this house, so I can archive vast buckets of stuff. And yet, here was something clearly that was part of his life.
No, wait, you were out of the country? Were you living at home at the time? I mean, I know you were out of the country.
Well, I moved because in the mid-90s, I moved over. We had I don't know if you guys had it, but we had what was called the recession we had to have, which was in 1990. And when that hit, unemployment rate was high, and money dropped out of the economy, and it was all quite, it was bad. And so I was just taking contract work, and I was a contractor, and I was doing 6 months, 6 weeks, 3 weeks, 3 months, whatever I could take, I was doing work. Yeah. And then one day I thought, I could be doing this in any country. And I had access to a European passport or a British passport because I'm from Adelaide. So, and then that was it. It was just a matter of, okay, well, I can do this overseas. I'm going to do it overseas. And bang, I just did that, traveled overseas and did that for a while. And that's, as soon as I'd left, that was it. It was like, he's left the house. That's it. Bang, room done.
If he left it, it may have been considered an abandonment under law, right? I think she perhaps was within her legal right. Well, I don't know law of Australia, but it is the common law, right? I mean,
I assume it's common law, right? Back to the 15th century or even before
all
that.
All the English colonies are going to be common law, right?
So I think
absolutely. That's what holds us all together is the common law.
If you'd like to make a claim on some of your family, maybe Dan knows some folks who could, international law or something like that, you could get involved.
Well, and I'm actually glad this topic has come up about the discarded books, because, we like to joke around here, but this is actually a very serious issue. As David, as you may know, we have here a D&D book reunification project, where we seek to reunify users, former owners, with their books. So, were there any identifying marks on the books? Did you have your name in it? Did you use?
Oh yeah, I had my name. Yeah, I had my name. I had my name on there, and I had in the DM's guide, I had my own table. Like one of the blank pages at the front, I wrote down various pages that I used for common referencing that I used, and so my own referencing system as well.
Now,
so it was.
I'm sorry.
Shocking.
Did you use as many of us did? Did you use the little punch machine with the black tape would come out? It would impress the white. Did you use that?
No, I wrote in solid blue kilometrico pyro pen my name, and I don't think I had my telephone number. I just had my name. On all my books.
And you went by David.
So it was the old cover. Yeah, it was the old covers as well. It was all the old cover books. The original first printings of the.
Right. It's probably even older than that one.
So
like the original.
So older version. So if all our listeners could please take a look at their old books, See if David Thompson will have some. It'll have some references to important pages in there.
Well, we need to move up in Australia because it's not going to be. I mean, if there's an international book smuggling trading, I don't know if it's gone international where these books that have been stolen from people have been traded internationally. Do you think that's like a human book trafficking?
Well, the problem is, my understanding is David's mother put them in a dumpster.
Right.
She didn't sell them on eBay.
Right.
So this could be it could happen, but this is going to be a little more challenging reunification project, don't you think? We'd have to trace it. Maybe we should start with talking to his mother.
Right. Well,
finding out where she threw them out at. Yeah. Talk to the local waste management company. Maybe we could find the old supervisor or somebody from the mid '90s.
That's right.
What is it, Adelaide?
You could be our Australian chair of the Dungeons and Dragons book reunification initiative.
Or maybe no.
It has to be initiative.
Well, it could be he could be like the Grog, just in a higher title.
Okay.
The Australian GROGTALK.
The Australian ambassador to GROGTALK.
Yes, the GROGTALK ambassador.
I always wanted to be a viceroy. Could he be a viceroy?
Yeah, it should be more D&D-ish, don't you think? Yeah, you'll be
Viscount, right? That Viscount.
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 Yeah, Viscount.
We'll have various Viscount, or you'd be a lord.
Right, that will be some of the things. You can decide whatever book it on Dungeon Master's Guide, the titles. Sultan, perhaps, of Australia.
I always like Thane. I always like the idea of a Thane. I want to be a Thane. I don't know what country uses the word Thane, but I always wanted to be a Thane.
All right.
A prestidigitator, dictator.
Well, that's a level type. Well, he'd have to be an illusionist since he's the one who.
But our people should have levels.
Right.
So he's level 1.
Right. We're all level 1.
No, we're level. Come on, we're like the hosts. We're the co-hosts.
Okay.
We're gotta be like level 3.
Okay, I'll give you that.
think?
Well, depending on is that based on subscribers? Because if it's based on subscribers and viewers.
In Sweden, we're level 5.
Well, Sweden, we are moving up. They are. We're almost building a settlement there. We're that level. We'll have followers. So.
You said we hit the top 10 in Sweden earlier this year.
So yes, I think you still doubt me, and we're not going to complete. While I show him this, so you've played in basically 2 continents, right? You played in England. Did you get a chance to play when you were there? And
yes, I did.
Obviously played in Australia. What did you notice any differences between those styles of play, just between the UK and Australia?
They were more story driven. They really liked the idea of getting into doing big story campaigning style, and the even just doing little hits of adventures were, but how does that fit into the larger thing? So I don't know if that was just the group that I'd caught up with, or if it was a trend across the way, but they were very much more into the more depth of the adventure and whereabouts it sits and what about the local lord. And they would ask questions. About, so what's the name of the local lord? And what's the history of this area? I'm a magic user. Do I know anything magical about knowledge? Do I have any knowledge about any creatures or people that lived in this area before, and this land and so on and so forth? So they would really get more into the actual background side of it. Well, like I said, the group that I was with did anyway, and I thought that was quite fun because I would quite often do all of that, and then my players would always just want to go and kill stuff and not actually ask any questions. Yeah. It's like the DM's guide, it warns us of that. It says that the players just want to do things efficiently and cheaply and clod their way through the
the adventure,
the dungeon crawl. And that's so it was just like that's what they were after. It would seem that the group that I was with over there were more keen on knowing a bit more of the history of the land and so on.
I'm curious, and I know Dan's got a question. I'm curious if it's because I listened to a podcast that they're from England and they have the same kind of background. They played up until the late 80s, and then they call it the Deep Freeze, the Grognard Files, and then they came back to it. I think D&D wasn't as big as like RuneQuest and Cthulhu and Traveller, and so those combat was very deadly. It was something you didn't want to do because you probably weren't going to survive. you weren't very good at it, so the stories were, the games were more story driven, and maybe the cultural too. So that's fascinating that you not recognized but identified that difference. And yeah, so I don't know if you always, when you have a sample set of one, you never know if it's indicative of the whole culture, but that was your experience. Yeah. Dan, did you have a question?
Yeah, David, I'd be interested to know if in going through the books and trying to organize the material and clarify the material, are there any inconsistencies that you've come upon that you struggled with? So one of the things that I struggled with when I started putting together a document was discovering some of these inconsistencies, and if you did find some, what was your approach to it? Did you simply accept them as inconsistencies? Did you say, well, I'm going to try to reconcile them? Did you say, well, the DMG trumps the
Some of it was
handbook?
reconcile, but you also had to look at it from the order that the books were produced. There was obviously a chance of them to write something and then go back and rewrite something. I mean, the way how they talk about certain character classes in the player's handbook and then in the DM's guide, it's almost like the player's handbook's the sales guide to be this class, but then in the DM's guide it's like, yeah, but it comes
Yeah.
to do that, and it's like, yeah, you can do this, you can do this, you can be this amazing guy, and it's like, yeah, but they can't do this, or they have to wait till their 12th level, and that's only going to happen up to 3 million experience points. And that's actually one of the points. Is I'm sure that I'm trying to find it as I'm scrolling through, but that there is one passage somewhere where the experience points, it actually was called EP, and there's a whole lot called XP.
Yeah.
And so obviously at some point they thought, oh, experience points EP, but then I don't know, whatever Electrum piece or something else came in the way, and thought, no, we've got to call it XP or something. So, but I can't remember the exact location of where I saw the EP, but I did make mention of that in my deconstruction, where it's like, well, look, somewhere it's called EP, but got later adjusted to XP. And you can tell that some of the bits and pieces were by space or time. He didn't have time to write something, so he just wrote that down and then expanded on it elsewhere. And you just go, well, that doesn't help anybody by putting it in a book that the players aren't allowed to actually read, And so you sort of that's what I was trying to do, is bring it all in. But generally the DM's guide would expand on a few of the broad statements on a player's handbook on something, especially like scrolls or on something else, or, and then it will say, right, well, this is how it's actually going to work. And like I said, I think that the player's handbook is that sales guide, the glossy brochure that says, here's your fighter class, boom, or here's your ranger, you can do all these things, you're a killing beast and you can do that. But then it doesn't tell you anything about tracking, or it doesn't really explain certain things and why a first level is better than a second level or a fourth level when it's the same percentages. And so you've just sort of, there's some of that where you have to draw upon other factors as well. So like I had some, that was actually one of the things that I asked about, was the tracking guide. And because I remember the questions I asked, like when I would say that I've asked questions, it was like, the halfling, why does it have a constitution of 19, +1 on the dexterity? Did you mean, and so the question I gave to him was along the lines of, well, this is how we're playing it, where they go to 19 dex and they have 19 con, because if you're a young adult, you get +1 to your constitution. And if you happen to have 18, then it goes to 19, and so on and blah. And expecting a yes or no, and pretty much I got a paragraph back confirming that's a good idea. Let's do that.
Can I ask you about that, because that's a significant issue. So that was in your letter, and I was about to bring that up because I remember somebody had posted on YouTube that they had asked about that, and I was going to ask. I couldn't remember if it was you or not, and obviously was. So that was in your letter that you sent to TSR with your 5 questions. One of those questions, it dealt with the dexterity issue on halflings?
Yeah, because it was like, well, we played it with 19 dex because we just thought 19 dex, it's +1 to dexterity. And then when I was reading through the player's handbook or doing something on the player, and I was like, well, why does it say 1819? And it didn't even occur to me that there was a typo. It didn't even occur to me that they were just, oh, it was a mistake. It didn't even, like, why would they make mistakes? They don't make mistakes. These are the people that write the books.
I'd be interested to know who authored the letter. Did they sign the letter? Because, that was brought to Gygax's attention, apparently, long after the fact. And Gygax was surprised that he had not been aware of the typo, and he confirmed that it was a typo. And so I'd be interested, it sounds like whoever responded to your letter perhaps didn't bring that up with Gary Gygax. Now, that's not surprising to me because, Sage's advice, if I recall correctly, oftentimes I think the answers to Sage's advice, my understanding anyways, weren't necessarily vetted by Gary Gygax. I think he was famously upset with Jean Wells' answer where she said that a magic user could hold a weapon, a dagger, and still cast spells, she said as long as you can still do the somatic requirements. And Gygax, I think, was unhappy with that, is my understanding, because he felt it would be almost impossible to do the somatic requirements with only one hand. And I guess you also have to get out the spell component to do all those things. So, yeah, I'd be interested, David, to if you remember, who signed off on the letter dealing with
it. You don't know. It wasn't Gary Gygax that responded back directly. That would have been way too...
Right, that you would have remembered, I assume.
Yeah.
Yeah, that I would have well and truly remembered. Oh, wow, he writes his, he answers his own mail.
Yeah, and I think by the time David's playing, because I know allegedly that people would look up his phone number in Wisconsin and call, and he, basically his home number.
Right.
And they would he'd answer the questions and people would call.
Yeah.
And this is, and then later, you die to be able to do that, right?
Right.
You wish you could do that. This is the opportunity people have now with GROGTALK.
That's right.
You're not taking advantage of it.
Right.
We're here waiting. You can simply call in.
Right. John calls. That's right. David has chimed in. Other people, when we're beyond this and we have thousands of fans clamoring to talk to us, we'll be like, I'm sorry, who is going to be our we're going to have to decide who's going to misinterpret what we want done. It'll probably be Nico.
David.
Oh, David and I are on the same page. Like I said, I read his missive, his books, and he's tried to fix, and I use that open close quotes, like hit points. He makes a very persuasive case why a fighter should never get one hit point even though they roll it, using zero-level characters and NPCs.
Can I ask him some questions? I have some questions here.
Sure.
These are totally irrelevant, but these are things that I picked up on when I started going back to the rules. Dave, do you have an opinion on the issue of whether a half-orc can go to level 8 as a thief? And the reason I raise this is that it says half-orc thieves with a dexterity of less than 17 are limited to 6th level. Those with dexterity of 17 are limited to 7th level, but you can go up to 8. So you say,
correct.
Wow. So a half-orc with an 18 dexterity can go up to level 8. Well, there is a problem. The maximum...
They've only got a maximum of 17 dexterity. Exactly. That is exactly right.
So what's your opinion? So, I posted this on, I think on Dragon's, but I can't remember where, this issue. Maybe it was on a Facebook site. What is your opinion on that? Do you think that is a typo, or do you think that Gygax was limiting that to moving up to 18 via magical means?
Yeah, I'm just via magical means. I've always thought of it as terms of that, because you can always increase your stats through wish, through alter reality, through other ways and means down the line, when you've got powerful things. And I think there's even a couple of other magical, there might be a magical item or something that gives you +1 to dexterity.
Yeah.
That's where I think it comes from. I think it comes in the fact that if you're a base half-orc thief, you're stuck at 7 unless you can work to get your dexterity up to 18.
Do you think...
I don't even need to be here. He answered exactly I would. So if I'm never available, you can just Skype David. It could be the David and Dan show. That international.
Yeah.
D&D.
No, you're just going to be the key grip or
D&D.
whatever.
I'll be the key grip.
D&D. You're not even a D.
I'm not. I'm a J. I don't even have a D.
Oh, it could be DJ, though.
Well, DJ D.
But do you think it was a typo, and are you simply reconciling it now, or do you think that Gygax actually intended what he wrote there?
No, I think he intended that. I think he intentionally made that happen, because that is not an accident that it says that all the main character classes are limited from the seventh, less than 17 at 17, and then at stat 18. Whether it's the gnome illusionist at 7th level or something, or whatever it was, and the magic user for the elf at 11th level, and especially the poor half elf, where everything's going to be 5th, 6th, or 7th level. You're rarely going to have anything higher than that for the half elf. That's intentional. And so the half orc element to it, that is also intentional, because it actually gets the -1. Like, they want the half orc thief to be the back alley basher. Excuse me. That is really what I think that they perceive the half orc thief to be. It's not a second story man or a
Right.
a master burglar. They are, I'm going to hide in the back. I'm going to be a fighter thief and be a 10th level fighter and a 7th or 6th level thief, and I'm just going to hit people.
Oh yeah, I'm gonna push you down and take your stuff.
Right. I'm a thug. Like
That's what I really think that that, not so much a drawback, but I think that that's one of those things where they really put the half orc in that spot. I mean, I think it's interesting that the half orc is in there, considering how a half orc is created, and clearly it's a matter of, well, we're all adults playing this game. They don't think that 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13-year-olds are playing the game. And so how's a half orc made? Oh, wow. So what's the word fecund? And then you look that up and you go, ooh, okay. Because orcs are particularly fecund. It's just like, what? But, I guess in pros.
Opposites attract.
That's right. That's right. Could be. Well, and I don't think we even thought about it that way at 9 or 12. We're just like, well, okay, they're just half and half kind of thing.
Does it bother you that a first level thief's hear noise ability is 10%? Yet,
well, that's racial ability.
Innately, it's higher for many races.
Well, it works out to be the same. So if you've got a first level elven thief with its bonus, it works out to be the exact same as if they're a normal first level thief. Oh, so, this is where the whole hear noise sort of thing comes in my mind. I see it as like, okay, fair enough, hear noise. That's what it is. But when you think that it's like, well, what a thief does, that it's the heightened senses. So I've tried to expand on that and say, well, look, hear noise whilst it's called hear noise, but does it just mean that only the hearing has been increased? Can the sense of smell be increased? Can the sense of, because as a thief is improving their body and their, their mastery over the environment for themselves, to manipulate the world, they learn these other skills where it's like, okay, they sniff something. Yep, I know that perfume, it's this. That's what they do. So if a normal fighter says, I listen to the hear noise, and they've got to have a better chance or hear the same thing as a thief who's trained at hearing the noise. So what the quality of what the thief hears is going to be different to what a normal person would. So what a normal fighter would hear is like, okay, you might hear a sound of something grumbling, whereas a thief would you actually hear the snoring of something. That you have that quality but that's just pure role playing and entirely up to the judge's discretion as well. But I just sort of, I suppose I draw on the how they talk about what's the thieving ability that read languages, where they just read a language and then they can interpret as much as the percentage of the language. And it's like, well, that's an interesting, if you put that in there and you apply that logic. And I also applied the logic of how they did climbing walls, where the difficulty of the climbing walls adjusts the percentage of fail rather than just a modifier. You don't get a -20%. What it does is it doubles your chances of failure. So if you've got a 90%, that 10% becomes 20% and so on, So I sort of not played with it, but I used rules that they've already got, and I've tried to say, well, imagine this. Why should, anyone can call themselves an assassin, but really an assassin does it best, and they've got the skill, so they should be better at it.
I think that, and I had not realized that, Dave's absolutely correct, that the percentages for the race of the listener on page 60 of the DMG the increase above 10% does correspond
Right.
with the. I didn't know. Did you know? I didn't
No,
know
I
that.
didn't.
Um,
I didn't pay attention because hear noise. We never did that.
what
So I
always
wasn't
bothered, well, what bothered me was the fact that it would be so these first and second level thief, your hear noise percentage would be exactly the same listening at a door as as someone who wasn't a thief.
right.
But I like David's way of playing it, which is to say, well, number one, hear noise extends beyond just listening at a portal. Now, you can make the argument it only applies to portals. The descriptions refer to portals, but I do like that. It is called hear noise,
Right.
not
It's not hear
listen
noise
at
behind
door,
doors.
right? Or listen at door. And I also do like the way David plays it.
That one says listening at doors versus
right.
hear noise. Yeah.
Right.
And I think that is something that DMs and referees have to be very careful for, especially as you've been exposed to later editions. I think one of the things that are part of first edition, this is the idea of class, that is, and that their skills are parochial. They are part of that. And later editions kind of let you mix and mash, and other games let you mix and mash. And so you get this thing of, well, everyone's going to listen, which makes sense logically, but to David's point, and we have to keep reminding ourselves that really the thief should get an enhanced quality of information. The assassin should be able to be more creative with it. You can call yourself whatever you want, but it's not going to be as artistic. He had thieves, like he talked about the saint in his as examples versus Bilbo or one of these other things. You can fit them all in there, but Conan, who's kind of a thief fighter in a lot of things, he's not, at least not the non-Arnold Schwarzenegger version. If he's just a fighter who has thief-like things, it shouldn't be as good or even in the same realm as he can still sneak around, but he's not going to, he can get into places, but he's going to use rope. He's not going to climb up the wall like some kind of Batman or a Spider-Man. So, no, David and I are on the same page on a lot of things. He wants to improve the fighters because he thinks they get a short end of the stick. So he says specialization.
Certainly.
So that's something I put in my game, because why would you be a fighter when a ranger is a little more XP and paladin's a little more XP and they have tons more abilities, and fighters are useless. So and I like your idea, and that's what I was going to do, but unfortunately the game I inherited, the players already promised things, so I had to adjudicate that. But future, only fighters get specialization. Hit points, he does a nice job kind of arguing why fighters shouldn't have one hit point. And he even addresses some of the frustration that people have with magic users. You got one spell. He gives them a little bit broader spell selection. It's kind of a minor thing.
Well, that's actually that's in the book though, where it says that you start off with your read magic and then 3 of those, or you can do read magic and 3 of those plus 1 extra of this and this. And that was one of the questions that I did put forward, and the response that came back on that one was that, well, they always ran it with read magic and detect magic and then 1 of each.
And it makes perfect sense.
If it was a particularly nasty or depending on how they were feeling in terms of the type of adventures they're running, that would also include 2 to 5 scrolls. And so that's why I mentioned that as well, because that's not written in any of the books, and that you get a couple of scrolls. But that was what was written back to me when I wrote in and said, well, look, is this it? Is this you've got it down here as 2 options for the magic user, as this and this or this. Couldn't you have just put it, I play it like this? And the response was, well, yeah, that's how we do it, with the read magic, detect magic, and 1 of each. And and we also sometimes include extra scrolls. And I was like, oh, okay.
And I think that's what makes it. I think you give people permission. When we played, if it was optional, we tried to avoid it as the dungeon master, because it was always this tension of players always pushing the envelope, and the line is drawn here. This is as far as you shall not pass kind of dissertation, and your whole as a 13 to 19-year-old, it's a different style of play than I have now, which is oh, there's an option. Oh, it's discretion, which is, it's in the first page. You have to decide the type of thing. We just generally said, nope, you get 4 spells. That's what you get. Oh, comma, hey, you can provide this, particularly if it's a nasty campaign, or you can provide more things, and you're not breaking it. And I think that's where you do a really good job in the book, in your ebooks, kind of giving permission to add the conditional and not feel like you're breaking the game. So,
Yeah.
Those were 3 things I saw that not even fix, deal with the reality of the game, which is it's deadly enough. Magic users are bored because they have 1 spell. Hit points are super deadly. You also mentioned no matter what the hit is, you can go to 0, and then you get beat down from there if you keep getting hit. So that makes people survive a little bit more. So there's, you add these things in here, and I think you do it in a way that if people played that way, and then someone, okay, well, that's not the rule, they could go, well, it's part of the rule, and it's certainly a valid way to play. So I think that was really good. I'm just curious, is it enough? I think a combination of YouTube and your book and the books could get someone through it, as long as they don't watch later editions, because it's so radically different. It's so radically different. It's
Well, and quite often what I used to get frustrated with when I watched a couple of the YouTube channels, there'd be something and they'd go up to a point and then completely miss the target, and then the person would say, yeah, and we never use that anyway. And it's like, well, you're not helping anyone.
Right, exactly. Well, and I know I have to be careful with that too, and just because I think it's like you said, the number one thing is what's your players expect, because I think we have I think the other challenge with first edition is you have so many people who've played it for decades or had played it,
Mm-hmm.
and then they have their version of playing it. So if I was to run a game for Dan and you've played for 35 years, you know how you played it, and if I interpret a rule and we haven't come to consensus on, well, this is the permutation we're playing together, not how we played individually, we'll be fine. But if not, then it's like, well, wait a minute, the DMG says this, and all of a sudden you're into rules lawyering event. We're all kids and young adults, and someone would figure out, oh, this is how we do surprise. We just did it that way. We just assumed he did the research, and we should have realized that that's a lot of work. They would just figure it out. So is in your part of Australia, is D&D the predominant game or role-playing game, or did other games come and go? Because I know in England, for instance, in some parts of Asia, D&D may not be the most popular game. Here it was pretty dominant everywhere I went. We would try other games, Paranoia, Top Secret, Star Frontiers, but it was never it was D&D, and then the other stuff was kind of things you did when you wanted to try something different.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's pretty much how it was. The D&D was the big daddy of them all, and then the TSR farm that just sort of produced, the Star Frontiers and Gamma World, but they were all quite small. I don't even think we ever got Boot Hill in the country at all. I don't even think I've ever seen a copy of that here. But things like RuneQuest and MERPs, the Middle Earth role-playing game, or Rollmaster, they were quite popular. Because what ended up happening was that people would say, I want critical hits.
Yeah.
I want to do a critical hit. I want to be able to have this extra, oh, wow, you've got, Rollmaster, where you have so many tables and charts. And you're just looking to go, okay, but then, and you were hoping that to get that critical hit that would say you hit your opponent and their entire skeletal system turns to jelly. That's the sort of thing you want. They're the sort of effects that you wanted to hit on others, but not have hit on you. But, as Gygax says, as soon as you do something for one, you're doing it for all. And, so that's the sort of the Rollmaster was big, and Middle Earth role-playing game was obviously big for a while, which is the same thing. And Fantasy Heroes and the Champions system, that was quite popular. But well and truly, D&D is the gateway drug of choice.
Yeah. I'm surprised Boot Hill, because obviously, Australia's an interesting. I researched it, 35 years ago when I was a student, but the parts of the country there, because of the size of it, you have parts of it that are very Western, what we would call Western. So you could do an Australian version of Boot Hill, which I think would go over
Oh
pretty
yeah,
well.
bush rangers and all that sort of thing. Absolutely, you could. Well, I think they've now got one out, the miniatures game, which is like a Wild West miniatures game, and they've got an Australian supplement where you do bush rangers as part of that. So you can have Ned Kelly up against Jesse James.
See, I mean, that to me would be that'd be the hot ticket, because again, part of it is, I think, and now we're getting into the 21st century. We didn't think about having quote unquote culturally appropriate games. We took medieval Europe as we kind of Excalibur meets Lord of the Rings, and said, "Oh, that's fine. That's good for everyone." But it's
Fire and Ice /
yeah, exactly, yeah. And then whether it was Iron Maiden or whatever, we kind of accepted that, and that was part of our history, Western history tradition. It's fascinating to see how people take this idea of fantasy and apply that. And even in our game, some of the better games, the Pharaoh series, where they had the Egyptian theme of it and prehistoric. So there's definitely a lot of value. So Dan, do you have a question that you have remaining at this point?
Yeah, just so I think the final question I would have, David, you mentioned that most of the time you DM'd as opposed to played. I'd be interested to get your thoughts on what attributes are there to being a good DM. So
Yeah.
when you're running a game, what do you think? Or if you're playing in a game, because a lot of times, the way you learn how a good DM is not by DMing, but by playing and watching the DM. If you could give some tips to an aspiring dungeon master and how to play, so in the in-game, I know, before the game you want to do all the prep and work it up and be prepared, but in terms of in-game play, what would be your advice?
Never let them see you sweat. So the one of the coolest things you can do as a DM is obviously just be, it's your game. It's your game as much as it is the players. I know a lot of people seem to think that the DM doesn't get involved in the game or anything else, but I've always seen it as the point of view of it's my story. It just happens that everyone else is a player doing their part, and they're actually involved in my story that I've created. And that's the reason that they're all doing things. And then, of course, the players are doing what they want to do, but ultimately, from a DM's point of view, we want to try and still maintain that sort of distance of not getting too involved, and getting too emotionally attached, but still want to be involved and play. So that never let them see you sweat is really important. You want to have that poker face as often as possible, because quite often what my players found is that while they're discussing something, I'd be thinking, that's a great idea. I should do that. And so eventually they got wary of that. And then when they were doing their pre-planned huddle, they'd get into a huddle and then they'd be working something out for themselves, and then they would come back. And that's good in my mind, where you've actually got 5 guys who just go, right, and they're having their little secret meeting as to what their action they're going to take before they enter into this room. Because if they say, if they have the open conversation, then obviously as a DM, you are going to be influenced by it a little bit, and you'll just go, yeah, I like that. I might steal that idea. That's a good one. Yeah. And then boom, you guessed, or this is it, or I'll do it in the next room. And so, they learned to keep their own little musings private. But the players are going to want to try and do this thing, and you're going to have to look at it and go, what on earth are you thinking? The bridge is right there. Why don't you cross it? You heard me say bridge 4 times, but and players do what players do. So my guys were the ones, I don't know if it's sort of come out somewhere anyway. I heard someone else talk about it. My players are the ones who had the gazebo incident. I don't know. Have you guys heard of that?
No.
Do you know what a gazebo is, yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah, right. So this is a bunch of teenagers, right? We're all playing in the back and whatever else. And so one of the guys wasn't there, and so we had a mini one-off mission to make use of everybody. And so all they had to do was to break into this house, steal some things. It was a smash and grab, and then out they go and whatever else. It would have been an evening's worth of play, 4 or 5 hours, all done and dusted. Everyone would have had fun. And then we can continue on the adventure next week when everyone was together. And so they scoped the place out. Yep. They all come in. Yep. They decide to come in from the back. Okay. So I'm describing how the fence, and they climb up. No, they get over to the fence and they're in the tree line. And I talk about between them, the trees and the back of the house is a gazebo. And so then they get into their huddle and then they say, okay, I knock my arrow, I put this, and we attack the gazebo. And I'm sorry, what? And before, you know what players are like, the moment they start rolling dice, do I hit? 18, yeah, hit, yeah. And I do, they're already proceeding ahead as if it's, like, I'm just thinking, you, what are you doing? And so they've just gone bang, 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 like they've scored these hits on the gazebo. And then they've just gone, did we kill it? Or how much damage? I said, no, it's a gazebo. They go, oh no, this thing's tough. Let's get away. And then they jump back over the fence.
They thought, so they were confused. They didn't understand what a gazebo.
They thought it was a monster.
They thought it was a monster. Yeah, they just had this idea that it was a gazebo. That the gazebo was a monster of some description.
I've heard. And
in my mind, the way I played it is just that it was a matter of what they've done is they've seen the shadow of something. They didn't know what it was. They had a couple of shots at it. They heard it ping and whatever else, and then they've done a runner. Now, in my mind, it played out completely different to the chaotic nature of it all because, like I said, it's my story, and that's how I imagine. So I'm chuckling. It didn't occur to me until after. They don't know what a gazebo is.
I have an image of one of those kitten videos where, there's just something like this. Something stationary is sitting there.
And they just assault
it. And the little kitten walks up to it and pokes at it and pops up in the air. And...
I thought there was a Dragon magazine where they talked about demonic lawn accoutrements. I thought maybe that's what they read. There was this, type 6 lawn furniture or something like that. Maybe they misconstrued that. That's the only thing I'd say.
So when they were attacking the gazebo, it didn't dawn on you at that time that they didn't understand it's a gazebo. So you're just like, why are they attacking this gazebo? So you're like pulling out the saving throw for wood or something.
That's right.
Charter.
It's like crushing blow.
Because structural points wise, they're only doing 1 point of damage to it, and the gazebo would have like about 8 or 9 points, and it's like, what? No, what are you doing? No, you haven't done any damage to it.
Yeah. So.
And they ran away. Did they come back? Wait, was that the end of the evening, or did they come back?
No. Then they came in on another. Then they came in on the front. And once I realized that they just didn't know what a gazebo was and they escaped out. And then I told them afterwards, I said, look, this is what it, because we actually have there was actually, in our city, in Adelaide, there's a thing called it's actually it's not like it's an unknown word. It's an actual place, like it's a thing. So it's just that they didn't equate it to outdoor furniture. They just... But anyway, so they entered through another side way and killed everybody inside and completed the mission and whatever else from there. Just so funny.
It's fun for all,
yeah.
Slaughtered
and then it was like,
stole their jewels,
like,
killed the kids. It was great. So
and then they went out the back to with the gazebo and it was, oh, you mean it's a structure?
Stupid gazebo, and they burned it.
That's right. Then
stupid gazebo.
Then they had to make sure it was dead.
What would have happened to me coming back to the game 29 years later would have been the opposite. The DM would have said, okay, well, there's a golem. I'm like, okay, well, I go inside it and relax.
Right.
Like, no, that's a monster.
That's right. That's a monster.
I would have thought the monster was a piece of furniture.
Yeah. No, that's a good one because, that's, I think a lot of people looked at these books and, I wasn't a reader as much as I guess I'm a little bit more now, but still never was a consumer of books. But these books were the ones I read constantly. Yeah, I wasn't.
But you did your Australia.
Well, that was for some reason I had an obsession. Yeah, so I'll have to show up there at some point. My father-in-law lives 6 months in New Zealand, which again is not that close.
That's across the ditch. We call that the ditch. The Tasman Sea is called the ditch.
Yeah.
You know how you call it the pond or the Atlantic Ocean? We call it the ditch.
The ditch,
There are brothers across the ditch
That'd be a good name in a campaign role.
What?
A body of water.
A ditch.
Called a ditch,
Yeah.
don't you think?
I think that would be.
Incorporate that.
Well, that's what we need. We need to flavor up instead of our generic
Right.
U.S.
Dark Sea.
Yeah, just the ditch, the big ditch.
The ditch.
Or the ditch. That's good. But yeah, I don't know why I did research. I think it was we had to pick countries, and that was one that was interesting to me because that was going to be my escape plan in fifth grade if America. Because I grew up in New York, and then Escape from New York came out.
Oh, I remember that.
So I really thought it was Thunderdome meets
Australia was.
Australia well, it was big. That's right. It was a big place, and you could kind of settle up. But
hot.
I found Orlando, so
it's hot here too.
Yeah, it's really hot here. But
Adelaide has a dry heat. You're looking at well over the 100 Fahrenheit. I don't know if you guys work in centigrade, but you're looking at 40 plus degrees centigrade during summer in Adelaide. It's flat, it's dry. There are no trees, no water. It's just that dry heat that absolutely just saps you if you're outside. You just lose all moisture.
And a lot of giant scorpions. Is that right?
Oh, just spiders. Just lots of spiders.
Oh, okay.
So you mentioned...
And snakes. There's this great picture of a gum tree with a koala in it, and it says there are 15 things in this picture that will kill you. Because
you have to find it. Yeah.
So would this be like you going
he
out
doesn't
on
see
a
it
walk
over
in
there.
Australia?
He wouldn't see it.
Oh, just giant spider?
Yeah, but on the website they'll see. Yeah, the giant spider from the Monster Manual. So
the Huntsman's. Yeah.
So you said you're not playing. Is that a personal reason why you're not playing? I mean, it sounds like
it's mostly time.
It's just time.
Yeah, it's time. I mean, obviously, I don't have there's no crew. The crew that I have, we're all old people, and they're scattered across the 3 different countries and whatever else. So there's that plus time more than anything. And I'm happy for the kids to play their D&D. No, they've got with their cousins and with second cousins. They're all into it, and so it's like pass it down almost, and so they come back and ask me questions all the time, and they come back and ask, oh, how does this work? And even the mini adventure I did for them, so to get their feet wet, and when they wanted to have a game, and so I was like, okay, yeah, I'll run the game for you, not a problem. And bang, I just created a game on the spot and went straight into it. And then a few months later, they're like, so are we ever going to finish that game? I said, if you want, I can put it all together, because you just I remember almost every single adventure that I've run.
Yeah.
And I've just got, because one of the things I call it the Tales of the Red Dragon Inn, where it's like, you just start in the tavern, the notice goes up, I want 4 adventurers to be able to bodyguard this. I want 3 people to, you sort of have almost like a minuet cube. I don't know if you've seen this thing that Mozart created where you've got 5 different sliders so that he can start his minuet process. It's the same sort of thing. You're like, okay, how are we going to start it? Yep. How are we going to keep going? What's the MacGuffin? What's the thing? Yeah. And just go, right, boom, there you go. We're doing this. And you can sort of always put together, a quick side mission or an evening's worth of play for go and find this person, go and get that thing. And they're used to that. Now, when you look at all the games, the video games, all of them have those sorts of, little side mission where I've got to go and find this. Right. You've got your main mission, and then I've got to go find this, and bang, and so on. So, I mean, so I suppose I'm there as a living resource whilst I'm still living, and things that I'm trying to not put everything I know up on board just to sort of prove that I know stuff, but it's one of those cleansing things for me. The game of D&D was was passed into me or brought into my life at a time when everything else was chaotic, and you're in control. It's your world, and so I would spend hours. I'd spend more time making maps than I would doing my own homework or whatever. As we did, and creating worlds and universes and so on. And when the Greyhawk supplements came out, oh man, I was all over that. That was gold. That was just fodder for everything, because all of a sudden you just had you showed them I think last week or the week before, they showed the Pluffett Smedger the Elder's notes on, and it's like, man, this is fantastic. And it's great I know that from a Gary Gygax's point of view, I think I read something somewhere that that was his adventure in his world. He didn't think that people would want to play in his world, that they'd make their own worlds. But, and, again, if you look at that is how to build a world. If you wanted a blueprint to how do I create a universe, that is where you would start. And then, of course, Ed Greenwood with the, Forgotten Realms was that was breakthrough as well.
Well, if I recall, it was Bob Bledsaw of Judges Guild who saw that first before TSR and Gygax did the supplements. And that players would want adventures and modules that were written for them, and campaign worlds like the City-State and the Borderlands. So yeah, I think TSR was a little late to realize that.
They were successful by themselves. I'm sorry, go ahead, David.
Yeah, I think that, no, I was going to say the exact same thing. I think that they had a few internal issues as well. There was they got to the point where they were big enough that suddenly they were big and bold enough that they felt that, the TSR had produced, like the Marvel superheroes game, the yellow box and the blue box. Mm-hmm. And they'd started to go down these other pathways as well, thinking, yep, we're going to be here forever. And then, without real leadership and without real strong guidance, and they've made a few business mistakes here and there. And the next thing you know, they were, failing everywhere. Yeah. And then they were like, well, quick, we just got to push stuff out. We've got to push stuff out and keep people buying stuff. And we just we don't need that. And you just sort of end up still going back to the same 3 core books, maybe the Monster Manual too, and just not worrying about the Dungeoneer's Guide Handbook too, and even the Fiend Folio, which we got obviously in Australia because it's the out of America, it's the un-American module, it's the un-American book. Right. So we got that. I had the copy of that, and that was spectacular. And it was. So we used that. But it was more of a case of TSR just self-destructing.
Yeah, I think for me it was more of they weren't businessmen. They were kids, and then eventually young adults, and they just assumed you all would do what they did, which was, here's some guidance, go figure it out. And then when it became a business, they just didn't really think that way. It's almost like they sold the razors, not thinking, well, we should sell razor blades because that's how we make money off this, and that people would want to buy our razor blades. And that was, you could tell that up until Magic the Gathering came out. It was an ingenious, insidious way of collecting cards, and wasn't a role-playing game, but that's why it made so much money. And eventually there's only a handful of people, and I don't consider myself in there, who can take an idea and just run with it completely. They need a lot of guidance, and if it's a time constraint issue, they don't have this idea of pondering hours and hours to create this. So it is interesting, and again, that history. And so I think we need to move to our suggestion. Do we have any more questions at this point? Yeah, because it's getting close to midnight for poor David, so I want to give him a chance to get some sleep. I
wanted to throw one more thing at you guys as well, just because you put it in as a joke, and I thought, I'm going to run with it.
Okay, good.
Mending and push.
Oh yes, mending and push. I'm sorry. Yes, you know I'm a big fan of them, so I apologize. So go ahead, give your what's your take on them?
Right. So push, as I said to you before, you've got the ability of doing the modifier per level, on something, so on. Yeah. But do you have a copy of the Monster Manual at hand in front of you?
We do.
Yep. So if you want to flick it over to the H section.
Okay.
Is it the H?
Yeah, the H, the letter H.
H. Yep.
Go ahead. Yep. Homunculus.
Oh, homunculus.
Have a look at the homunculus. Because it says there, the magic user must then cast Mending Mirror Image and a Wizard Eye to create a homunculus.
Oh.
So.
Wow.
Very good.
The magic user, yes, must then cast a mending spell, a mirror image, and a wizard eye. Yes, upon the fluid.
Yep.
Not any
Well,
fluid.
because it's a bunch of fluid. Yeah, because it's an alchemist that uses a pint of the magic user's own blood, and then a number of other things from an alchemist, and then that's it. You've got to cast those spells on it, and then you too can have an homunculus. So you can have as many homunculi as you can possibly supply blood for and gold pieces to pay for.
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't even think we've ever created one, nor have players ever asked to do that. So
but this could be very useful. They're 1.5 feet.
Right.
And
they can be 48 inches away. They're 48 inches away from the magic user, and they can then see and hear and do everything else all through it, just like the magic user can.
Which, of course, doesn't
so they can
mean inches.
Right.
Right? So
it could
in a dungeon set, outside.
Outside could be yards. That's right.
Yeah, outside. That's
48
right.
yards.
480 yards. You multiply it by 10.
480 yards.
Right. So it's almost a quarter of a mile.
And so
I was about to say it's
a
quarter of a mile
in the dungeon.
So 480 feet in the
dungeon.
Right.
480. 48. Why not 50?
Well, because it's
48.
It's the whole 12-inch ruler. You know, we're still in the English method. Our English overlords are still ruling us, even though we've declared independence a long time ago.
What level do you need to be to create? So
have a 7th level. You need because the Wizard Eye is a 5th level spell or 4th level spell. So you got to be about it. You got to be 7th level to be able to cast Wizard Eye. Yeah, you need Wizard Eye.
And it's just funny
mirror
because,
image and,
you make a really good point, because I don't think I ever read that. To me, that was a monster. But this is where, back to your original point, when your son was saying, "I need 3 books to make the game." It's not. It should be a line item in Magic User. At 7th level, you could make a homunculus. It's not even there. Your DM would have to expose this to you, which is just a different style of play. So
it requires 1 pint of the Magic User's blood.
Right. You get it.
How much is a pint?
Huh?
A pint. Wait, how much is a pint?
Pint's 8 ounces, 16
so
ounces.
that's like about 500. It's like half a liter.
Half a liter. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Well, it's like going to the blood bank.
That's terrible. How do you get it?
You'd get a sticker. I created 50 homunculuses. You know how they have the gallon donors and the thing? You could do that.
So yeah, you can donate. So if you're like poor, poor people and
but it has to be yours. I don't think.
No, that's what it's gotta be.
I don't think.
Users. So if you want to make extra money as a magic,
could you adopt a
But
homunculus?
you gotta be pretty high level.
That's really what the question is. Could you control? I'm sorry, David.
Under the control of the magic user, and it's all there. So the magic. So
is that the grog line? Hold on.
This is not the grog line. It's my daughter again. Does she not know that I'm on this, like the GROGTALK?
She's not streaming it right now. Well, she's not streaming it now because I had to turn it off.
Maybe she wants.
Well, I'm really angry because I told her. I let her. I know she knows about the GROGTALK because I told her the other day that we were 300 and.
That's right, 339 in Sweden.
In Sweden.
Right.
So she knows that I'm doing it.
And I have the chart to prove it. And in fact, because of her disruption, we're now 356.
No, this is great. The homunculus, its bite causes sleep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So it bites. Now it's got a hit, of course. It's only 2 hit dice.
Hey, 2 hit dice.
Well, you know what
2 hit dice is amazing.
It can come up upon people, bite them. And so I guess you use this to track, basically. The homunculus is in lieu of a ranger. Like, I don't need you. I've got a homunculus.
Right. And it's not
how I used to use the homunculus was I would actually have as a so that they'd be following the party, and eventually it seemed like something's around us, and you'd just be, what is that lurking in the, because they're 1.5 feet tall, they're 18 inches, so they're small, and they're following all the other rules for everything that's small. They just have to be silent, and it can fly, so it's got wings and it's got the flight, it's 18-inch movement flight, so it can definitely get away if it needs to. 2 hit dice means that it's like THACO 18 or 17 or something, so it's better than the 12th level magic user.
Right.
James, who's the magic user in your current group?
Nico and Jason's spouse.
What level are they?
He's ninth level now. So, but yeah, mending, that'll be the mission. I don't think he has mending, so he would have to. There'd be a big quest for that. They'd have to go probably to the
quest for mending.
That's right, the quest for mending.
Oh, come on. No. This is what you have to do. Help him out. Drop a mending scroll in there. Is that all they need? Drop the requisite scrolls in there so they can get one of these things. And know what you do then? You don't tell them about this. You see if they're listening. Drop the spell scrolls in there together. Like, what do you need? You need a mending?
Mirror image.
I'm sure they have mirror image.
Well, it would be ironic. He has 18 intelligence and he can't learn the spell. He'd have to roll it first. That'd be hilarious.
Oh, wait a second. But no, you need to. But if it's on a scroll.
A scroll he could do it with, but then he'd only get one homunculus. To David's point.
You have to learn. If he hasn't hit his maximum per level.
You can have an army of homunculi.
You could have homunculi.
So you can make as many. It costs money. How much does it cost?
They have tons of money.
If you're that level.
It's the blood.
Yeah.
It's the blood. A pint of blood.
It's the blood.
Yeah, it's the blood that you have to deal with. So you'd have to say, I don't know what the current rule is. How many times a week you can give blood before they won't allow you? Is it once a week or something like that? So
they do some saves. I think save versus something.
Oh yeah, that would be good.
Right. Just roll.
Well,
chance of death.
But this is where, does it have to be all your blood? Could you mix plasma in? Could you get Saul the blood bank and identity shop? That would be amazing.
No. I think it would have to be specifically the magic user because there's a link between the magic user and the homuncular. Because if you had a dozen homunculi, then you would have total knowledge of what each one of those is seeing, and you would know and they would know what you're thinking, and they're like a familiar how you can see through them all. So you then scatter them out into the winds. But the big drawback is that, like all things D&D related, if an homunculi dies, then the magic user suffers 2 to 20 damage.
Oh, okay, it's 2 to 20.
So therein is the risk of having more than one homunculus.
Right.
Is that because if you're a magic, so let's say you're 7th level magic user, what do you have? 9 hit points?
You could have anywhere between
you might have 12.
17 to average is 2.5. Right.
You theoretically, if you're 7th level magic user, you could have 7 hit points.
Right. You could have 7, especially if you have a low constitution.
So on average, 2.5. What's
2.5 is average. Would be about 17.5 would be average.
So
not including con bonus.
So this is an important conversation. Because even one, you could die.
You could die
from just one. You have one homunculus.
But I'd take that over.
Someone steps on the homunculus.
Right. Well, you know this is fireball. But yeah, you got an army of a cacophony of homunculi.
This would be interesting. You could. So what you do is you gather an army of homunculi over 20 years.
Right.
And then you have them descend on a village.
Right.
And they could probably the entire village could go to sleep.
Yes.
You could sleep the whole village.
But if there's one fireball, you would explode because of
one
that
fireball,
damage.
I mean, he slips.
Right.
2 hit dice.
They take 2. What David was saying is if the creature dies, you take 2 to 20. Now you have an army of these homunculi attacking. If 5 of them die, you're history.
Right. I was just saying the homunculi is 2 hit dice. Itself is 2 hit dice.
Right. But a fireball is.
Oh no, clearly.
Yeah, clearly that's the end of you. So why would you risk that? That person's not a genius at that point. I don't think that's a.
Yeah, who would actually?
You'd make one, but that's probably why I never looked at it. Same thing with Find Familiar. Oh, Find Familiar sounds great. You have a creature. Oh, you may get a quaist if you're lucky, or a pseudo dragon. Oh, you lose permanent hit points if it dies. No, thank you. I'll quit.
Ethical question.
Yeah.
The other one on the Find Familiar is the brownie, because it's like you're actually getting a halfling, like a small.
Right, until he gets off. Then you lose
permanent. Familiar gets killed, you take the damage?
Permanent damage.
How much?
It's like D4, double D4 permanent reduction of hit points.
We should have a segment, being a magic user sucks.
Right. Well, you said first edition sucks, so that could just be.
I didn't say that.
Yes, you. Oh, this campaign sucks. You're right. I stand corrected. That's right.
What campaign?
It was about the gem rolling. When we did the gem rolling, you rolled the gem, and you thought you were doing really well because you were rolling 20s.
You're talking about Pixie and...
right, that's right. And you thought you were going to have this huge gem, and you ended up, and you found out that you're actually making it worse by your press, and then you said, this campaign sucks. That is the quote of the episode.
I don't remember.
Oh.
So,
I remember that. That was funny.
If you come upon a homunculus, do you kill it? Because the problem now is, ethically, you don't know who magic user that's attached to. should you just sort of like trap it?
Are we
or grapple
we're
it?
going to deal with ethical quandaries now of the
Yeah.
creatures? Well,
Should you kill it? I don't think that's terrible. There's a magic user attached to it back there somewhere.
are
It
you
could
in
be
a,
Saul.
it could be Saul.
No,
Well,
he's
if
not
he,
7th level. Is
well,
he?
he's
Oh,
within 500 feet. So then the question is, if you're in a dungeon or a keep that you're assaulting, that you know there are enemies in there, that would be my first start.
You know what you do is you capture magic users and you make them create.
Right.
So what you do is you have the magic user that's working for you, and you force him to have the army of homunculi.
Yeah, I'm sure that because having magic users in duress, which is in the Dungeon Master's Guide, that they can't do that. They say they would struggle with making homunculi for your evil overlord. That would, unless you have an artifact.
It doesn't talk about homunculi.
It doesn't specifically talk about homunculi. You're true. So that is a great point, David. Thank you for that, because I thought it was really useless, but it's actually useful.
You know what my suggestion?
So
Well, it's only got one use.
Right.
It's a one thing. I mean, like the most interesting thing about that spell mending is that it has the same effect whether you're a 1st level or whether you're a 26th level.
Yeah.
There is not a single variable or element that is adjusted by level.
Yeah.
So it's not an extra element. So the way how I imagine mending is that your what you can put together probably improves in some way. So if you had like a mat that has gone through a shredder, then to mend it, you'd have to be a high level, a 1st level magic user. And if something was, because it says that if you had a broken crystal vase and you put it together, then it seamlessly. And so, I'm sure that somewhere there is a reason for wanting to have this spell. There must have been, aside from making an homunculus, because they've put it in there, and it's in one of the miscellaneous section of in what I call the not so useful spell lists.
Yeah, that's awesome.
What's a burr? The spell components for mending are either 2 magnets, which I find that's entertaining, or 2 burrs, B-U-R-R-S. Is that like the thorny?
Yeah, that's what it sounds like.
What does that got to do with mending? I understand the magnets because like putting together.
Right.
Or wait, no.
I think it's because they're Velcro.
Yeah,
oh,
like
they'll like stick together.
Yeah,
the burrs do.
Yeah.
Have you ever stepped on burrs with your
painful?
Very painful. Yeah, that must.
They probably kill you in Australia, but here they're painful.
So you got.
Yeah, we call them 3-corner jacks.
Oh, nice. 3-corner jacks. That's awesome.
Terrible spell.
I understand that, hence my point. But David he's again very persuasive. It went from completely useless to a specific useless, which then goes why
virtually useless.
Right. Well, and this is why magic, missile, and sleep and read magic, detect magic. Those are the go-to spells. They're the tier 1. Then there's tier 2.
Shields are good. Then you've got, like, in terms of defense, you've got the top tier.
Can you?
But my and I don't disagree with that. But my shield is a 1st level fighter in front of me, because that's the whole point. Now, if they're cowardly and they keep if you have fighters who run out in front and they leave you in the back, then yeah, I'm as a magic user and I got 1 spell, I'm gonna keep shield.
Can you do a reverse of mending? So can you use
Ripping?
it as a defensive spell to like crack something? Let's say someone else has a ring.
It doesn't say it's reversible.
No, it doesn't say it's reversible.
But you could argue that. Why not?
What's the rule on reversibility? I thought as a general rule it's reversible.
It would say reversible. You have to create your own spell.
Oh, it has to say reversible. So mending doesn't even. It's not even breaking.
No, it's a powerful spell of putting things together. It's a love connection.
It's Saul. No, it's right. Saul. It's Saul at the Path of Pearl. So it's like he's like the expert tailor. Things that people otherwise couldn't, like a broken ring, it can be very difficult to put back together for a jeweler probably. But Saul will be like, I can make. Well, so he's identify, shop, and
mending, and shoe repair, mending repair, map repair,
identify and mending.
He's like one of the. I don't know if you have them in our shopping centres. We have these little boxes of people who are watch repairers, locksmiths, and key makers.
So in D&D, the identifying and the mending kind of go together.
Right. And all that. Anything that's trivial that you never for adventuring, all those spells, and all the cantrips. You would have every cantrip, the chill and touch and all the ones you saw that people like B. I need to look up B again. Well,
summons 1B. They'll summon 1B. You have to make a zzz sound. It summons 1B.
But you can can use, yes, but but a well-placed, do not underestimate a well-placed bee, right?
Do not underestimate 2 magic missiles. That's what I say. That's going to kill a one-hit dice creature. A bee is going to potentially annoy an orc. I'd rather kill it. But, I'm trying to be less power gamer-ish, but it's taking me a while. So David, it's our suggestion, and I appreciate you with the mending. That was awesome. Awesome research. That was great. Since you're our guest, and we thank you for this time. I know it's getting late. Do you have a suggestion for our fair listeners?
Well, I was thinking about that. I was looking at one of the inspirations I had for putting all of this together and thinking, I should upload, or I should do something for the greater good of humanity and do this. I don't know. Have you seen the podcasts for Captain Courageous Black Belt Gaming?
I've viewed some of Captain Courageous. I've viewed some of Black Belt Gaming. Interested and really understand it. They do a great job. So I don't know if I've listened to everything they've done, but it's certainly well worth.
They're on the top of. Yeah, with this podcast, obviously, because I wouldn't be on a substandard. You wouldn't catch me on one of those substandard podcasts that you hear about so often that are not cracked the 250 mark in England. And that's why I thought, I was thinking, what'd be good? There's this book or that, or how to use an homunculus or whatever. Right. But it was like, no, these are probably good starts and good places to begin the journey.
Do you have a suggestion for this week?
I'm going to change it. I'm going with the homunculus.
Okay. It is a good one.
I like the homunculus. I think it's worth trying. I'm recommending the homunculus.
Yeah, I don't know why I didn't really think of. Gollum I've thought of, and you want to talk about craziness that you have to do to create something. Gollum's right up there. My suggestion is specifically, David, I think you have a wealth of knowledge. You obviously, we think a lot, as you've said. I'm going to encourage you, suggest that, you need to get a game going. Find some time. And the reason I say this is because I was kind of in your shoes. I think both of us were in your shoes 2 to 3 years ago. I was playing with my kids a little bit. And then just the urge to start up again, and I looked on Meetup, and Dan had just started his game with his friend Ed, 2 months before, and I started playing again regularly in July, and it's just been amazing. And I don't know any of these folks, so it's definitely an opportunity.
You don't particularly like them. You wouldn't.
Yeah, for the most part.
Normally,
right, right. But they are
for gaming.
You wouldn't lend a car. You wouldn't lend them your car or lend them money or anything.
No. That goes
it's
without.
Surprising that you disclosed your location of your house to me.
Right. Well, I've disclosed some. We had a party here, holiday party. So it's been a very good plus. It validated.
Now the people who weren't invited to the holiday party are like, what? There was a holiday party.
Well, that was a while ago. We've grown since then, and donations will be always helpful to that. So. Again, my suggestion is you clearly are passionate about the game. You've created this work, which I think will help people really feel a style. Because I think there's nostalgia is part of it, but also it's a style of game that it's I think people want to embrace. Because I see the redos of Call of Cthulhu and Traveler, and I don't mind them wiping the rough edges off or things that didn't make sense. But when they change the style of the game, just like you said, the idea of it's not adversarial per se, and I think there's more DMs who are more adversarial, but it's a dialogue, but not in a way that is storytelling for storytelling's sake. This is a game first, and the actions and the reactions of the DM, you're an active participant, and I think there's a style that first edition is easier to do than in 5th edition or later editions. I'll say 5th edition probably because I played 5th edition a number of times with my kids because that's the same game they play. And it is easier to get back to that first edition in some ways. You have to work at it. Whereas some of the other editions, it was problematic. Second edition to me is an extension of first edition. It's very similar. So.
Yeah.
Not much different.
Well, with some even worse charts in there where they had things like blunt weapons of like +5 versus plate mail, and everyone's running around with clubs because all of a sudden everyone was power gaming with 3 18s and 3 9s.
Right. Yeah, doing the point buys and min maxing. Yeah, and I think that there's a style play for that, and I have some players who would like to go that way. And you said you just gotta play the room, and as long as you're getting out of it. So, well, it's been a real pleasure. Now it's over midnight. You've got to get some rest. I appreciate all the time, and we'll definitely keep in touch. And if we do a live game, or if there's a topic you want to come back on, just shoot us a note. And Dan, do you have anything follow up for that?
No, just thanks, David. Pleasure to now have an Australian viceroy.
That's right, the Australian viceroy of GROGTALK.
Thanks for helping keeping.
I'm going to get some business cards made up on that.
Wonderful.
Yeah, just send James the bill.
Right. Yeah.
Fine.
Yeah. Well, that could be your gift then.
Thank you so very much. Thank you so very much for inviting me and letting me come on and talk about pretty much only the one of 3 topics that I know most about. So I really appreciate that.
Well, we appreciate it as well, and we'll talk to you soon. I'll try to get the podcast up this weekend. I'm going to have to do some pretty heavy editing just to make it cogent. Technology is great, but when it doesn't work, it's kind of a hassle. So it may be a little bit of work for me on my end. So just be patient. But look forward to talking to you soon.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, guys.
All right. And so for the rest of us,
you're doing a great job, and for all of your many fans and the people that absolutely love listening to it, just keep it up. It's fantastic.
Thank you so much. It means a lot to us. Thank you very much. And so for that, I think we're going to close this episode. So I'm James.
I'm Dan.
And we will see you next time on GROGTALK.